evening and welcome to the ICC Crack the Wellness Code Diabetes Management Forum. First of all, thanks to all of you for joining us. I know it's a long weekend and we're amazed to see the interest in this forum of ICC Crack the Wellness Code. I'm Somnath Chatterjee, one of the co-founders, along with Naren Bakshi and Dr. Pankaj Vij for this wellness movement. And as you can see on the screen, the Diabetes Management Forum comprises workshop, webinars, health hero stories and mentoring, and of course, support group, which is also something that we will hear later in the program. So it's a very holistic kind of effort to help the community to take preventive care and adopt best practices for diabetes. So let's move on to see what we have today. We are really delighted to have two leading endocrinologists who are also certified lifestyle medicine practitioners. So it's not that they have focused on diabetes and metabolic health, but they are believers and proponent of lifestyle medicine, something that ICC Crack the Wellness Code stands for. So welcome to both of you, Dr. Archana Bindra, who's going to moderate today's sessions, and also Dr. Soham Patel, who's going to be the leading speaker. So a lot of interesting things and takeaways. So how to boost your metabolic health for various types and stages of diabetes, therapeutics and preventive care techniques, diet and lifestyle tips, and also addressing various myths, basically to explode some of the myths, because there's a lot of information in the internet and otherwise, and sometimes it's very confusing. So here are two experts who are going to distill the information, filter them, and present to you in a very simple manner, and see how best you can take charge of your health apart from being aware. And of course, then we have some of these diet and lifestyle tips while, this myth, that we talk about. So there'll be a lot of tips for you as well. And then finally, of course, we'll introduce the health heroes. We have two of them today, but there are many with us today. We'll acknowledge them, including Mr. Naren Bakshi and Mr. Raj Shah, who is also here. He's going to talk later today. This is very quickly the event calendar. Our new website is up, www.crackthewellnesscode.org. So you can find the calendar here and also check out some of the new initiatives that we have lined up, including the 12 programs that you see here. So diabetes, of course, is one of them. And of course, there are many other areas, and you can see how we are engaging the community through these programs. How do we do this? I mean, we really have been very fortunate to have some of these drivers of our wellness ecosystem. So you can see it's all on the screen how we do it. It's amazing that 81 doctors have so far participated in our platform, and there are many more that we are going to be interacting with. ICC Crack the Wellness Code, we started in San Francisco Bay Area, has now gone pan USA and pan global. We also have doctors, from other locations outside the San Francisco Bay Area, and one of them, of course, is Dr. Soham Patel from, Tampa, Florida, and it's late in the evening for him, but he's still here, enthusiastically sharing his knowledge and wisdom with us on diabetes management. This is another very interesting initiative we have taken. We'll talk about it later. We'll also be running a poll. We are starting an introductory course for CWC ICC Wellness Ecosystem Service Providers and members. So we would invite you to take advantage of this, and any questions on that, please contact us. That's the email, and would absolutely like to hear more from you on this. This is basically how we help you. There are people who are lost, there are a lot of information, and then we offer you a bouquet of services, content, and so on, which you can see on your screen. And then finally, we sort of help you to become an explorer to an evangelist. And of course, before that, you become a champion. So that's the journey that we actually help you to, go through and take charge of your health. This is a set of membership packages. Interested, get in touch with us. This is just a quick blip before you start the program. And of course, all this is possible through a lot of orchestrated effort from our doctors, volunteers, and the people who make it happen. And we are also in midst of our digital platform, mobile app. So please donate liberally and help us to scale this movement globally and introduce more user-friendly applications to reach out to you, provide you kind of tools that you need for taking charge of your health and wellness. So without much ado, very quickly move on to the learning objectives for today. And these are two eminent endocrinologists that we have today who are also, lifestyle medicine certified from, from the authorities here. And Soham is also a member of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. Health heroes, you can see the screen, the pictures, tell you how enterprising they are. And of course, I don't want to say anything more. It is for you to hear from them. And let me now invite Dr. Archana Bindra, who's also the past president of APIO, and she's been very active in CWC right from the inception. So over to you, Dr. Archana Bindra.
Thank you, Som, for that kind introduction. And I'd like to thank the folks at CWC for inviting me tonight to be the moderator for this event. Seems like it has been put a lot of effort into putting together something very exciting for this evening. I'd also like to thank our attendants to, especially on this long weekend, to be able to come and listen to, I think, diabetes that is affecting so many of individuals around. So a little bit about myself. I'm an endocrinologist. I specialize in diabetes and currently also in lifestyle medicine. I'm also a part of the American College of Lifestyle Medicine, as well as certified in internal medicine as well. My practice used to be, a large part of it used to be diabetes and very uncontrolled diabetics, which is now slowly moving towards pre-diabetes and catching people early on in the earlier phase of diabetes. So I do see that it's swinging in the other direction. I practice out of San Jose at 2 locations and do have a busy practice. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Dr. Soham Patel. Dr. Patel is triple board certified, just like myself, in internal medicine, endocrinology, diabetes, and metabolism, as well as in lifestyle medicine. He also does a lot of research with nutrition, attends a lot of conferences and participates and is a speaker for many. And we'd love to have him here today and hear more about what he has to say. Over to you.
Good evening and good morning for people across the world, and special thanks for the attendees who are taking the time on this long weekend to be with us. And thank you, Dr. Bindra, for the kind words of introduction. As Mr. Chatterjee mentioned, I'm an endocrinologist here in Tampa, Florida, and my practice, I run a practice called Center for Preventive Endocrinology and Nutrition. As the name says, I focus on prevention and lifestyle approaches to the endocrine diseases that we see, like diabetes, thyroid, PCOS, high cholesterol, and for the talk tonight, we're going to super focus on type 2 diabetes and some of the common myths that I encounter in my practice every day, and try to help patients unlearn some of that and kind of get them on board and updated with the latest in nutrition. And interestingly, it is not that this research is new. It's been there. If you spend the last 100 years of data looking at different types of research, bench research to population research and everything in between, it has been there consistently, but there has been a lot of mixed messaging in the last few decades, and that's what creates a lot of confusion. So I'm going to try to help break some of those myths tonight and without further ado, I'll go ahead and share my screen so I can start. So right way into it, the first myth that I see all the time that is so ingrained in patients from years of messaging by their, from what they hear in the media, from online forums, for many times physicians, dietitians, um, that carbohydrates are the reason why they have type 2 diabetes. And they should be really scared of anything that says carbohydrates. And that's not true. Okay, I cannot emphasize enough that carbohydrates are not the cause of diabetes, but the quality of the carbohydrates is what makes the difference. So if you have started wondering what am I saying, I'm not saying that eating cookies, candies, and cakes is healthy, and that's what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is complex carbohydrates. Carbohydrates that are naturally found in the foods that the nature provides us, which comes with a lot of fiber. And actually, we cannot actually think of food as just macros. So thinking of food as, okay, this is for fat and this is for protein and this is for carbohydrates, it puts us in this macro confusion and complicates things further, because the way nature has designed things, there is fat, protein, carbohydrate, fiber, minerals, vitamins, and water, 7 different nutrients in each food that the nature provides. And yes, there may be one portion or one nutrient that is more dominant versus the others. So trying to put food into fat, protein, carbohydrate category, we are kind of really missing the whole essence of nutrition and getting mixed up. So as you see it on that plate, colorful plate on the corner of the screen here, a whole food plant-based plate. The word whole is very important. You see, goes back to fiber-rich form of foods. Eating an apple versus an apple sauce or without any added sugar versus apple juice. Let's say we have 100 calories of apples, pieces of apples, 100 calories worth of apple sauce without any added sugar, and 100 calories worth of apple juice. All three of them will be metabolized completely differently because of the content of fiber and how much processing has been done. So the apple will be the best because it has not been processed and the fiber is intact. So you have to actually chew it, break it down. The stomach has to do its job, the intestine has to do its job, and then that sugar finally gets to the liver in a very slow fashion. Versus applesauce, yes, it still has the fiber, but it has been cooked, so it is a little bit easier to break down and absorb. And the apple juice has no fiber whatsoever. So when you drink apple juice or any fruit juice for that matter, you are literally getting a big spike of glucose and fructose released into your bloodstream, which ends up to the liver. And that's the only organ that can process fructose, which is the sugar from the fruits. So making sure when you're focusing on fiber rich foods, that's the key. Fat accumulating inside the cells causes insulin resistance. You may have heard this term a lot. That's the cause of why we see type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes or PCOS or high blood pressure to some extent. That is coming from insulin resistance. What it literally means is the insulin that your body is making is not being processed. So your body needs to keep making more and more insulin, and it doesn't do what it's supposed to do at the liver level and the muscles. And you reach a point where your body cannot produce more insulin, but you're not getting the effect. And that's where you start with pre-diabetes and eventually diabetes. So buildup of that fat molecules in the liver cells and animal protein, those two factors can actually lead to insulin resistance. And eating foods which are naturally high in fiber, although they may be also high in carbohydrates, are beneficial in reversing that insulin resistance. We don't have to be scared of carbohydrates, but the quality of the carbohydrates is very pertinent. So focusing on wholesome foods like you see there, fruits and vegetables. You see lots of beans and lentils. You see whole grains. That's the type of plate you should be eating. You don't have to focus on macros, but you have to focus on foods which are naturally dense in fiber and the nutrients that comes with that. So I think I have drilled that topic so far. Going on to the second one that I hear all the time again, eating 6 small meals a day is not optimal. You've been told, or you may have heard, or you may have read it on the internet. If you have diabetes, you should be eating small meals frequently. I'll give you an analogy. Let's say we have a very high-end sophisticated machine, and we will put that machine to work 2 hours at a time, 3 times a day, versus second scenario, we put it to work 2 hours at a time, 6 times a day. Which scenario is going to give you longer life on the machine and better efficiency? It's going to be the first scenario where you are only putting it to work 3 times a day for 2 hours versus that 6 times, which is going to be too much. So that's the same concept with our body. Every time we eat food, the body has to produce insulin, because not just for carbohydrates, any food that the body has to break down, insulin is needed for its metabolism. So you need insulin for carbohydrate metabolism, you need it for fat and protein metabolism. So insulin is needed nonetheless. Now the proportion of insulin can vary depending on the type of food you eat. Lesser the fiber in the foods, more insulin is released. Higher the fiber, fruits, vegetables, beans, whole grains, lesser need of insulin. And also, the more amount of time the insulin is exposed to the body, the more effects you get, the growth effects you may have seen when people have diabetes or high triglycerides, which is a type of fat in the blood. They start getting skin tags, or they start getting blackening of the skin on the side of the face, or on the elbow or back of the neck. Those are all signs of insulin excess. When insulin exposure to the body increases, you start seeing those effects. So we want to limit how many times the body gets exposed to insulin. And that can be done by having 3 proper meals, maybe one fruit snack before dinner through the day. And you don't need 6 meals a day. And there are studies which have actually been done head to head, comparing 3 meals, well-planned meals versus 6 meals a day. And your blood pressure, your weight, your BMI, your sugar numbers all do better when you eat properly, but enough at a meal and less times a day. So it is very important to focus on the quality of the food and also the frequency of the food intake. And if it works in your schedule, it is good to have a good breakfast and decent lunch and have a smaller dinner. Now, some people don't feel hungry in the morning. That's okay. If you're the person who doesn't feel hungry in the morning, you have a bigger brunch as the middle part of the day, and then you have your next meal after that. So working on eating more calories in the middle of the day versus adding more calories in the evening hours plays a big role, because our body doesn't metabolize food the same way at night or evening hours versus the daytime. Also, we are less active in the evening hours. We tend to go to sleep it's very soon after meal. So it is important to focus on eating majority of your foods, obviously focused fiber rich foods, in the earlier part of the day, middle of the day, and go down as the day fades into the evening. I do want to go back onto my first slide and focus on saying this again, that this plate that you see there is kind of a goal to work towards. It is not about perfection. You will hear more from the health heroes maybe later tonight and the next session on June 11th. But the idea is to not perfect everything. The idea is to create progress mindset and keep working on adding more fiber rich food. So if you're not eating any fruits and vegetables, you start having one fruit and one vegetable every day. Next week you add two. Third week you add, more. So, and then if you're not eating any beans or legumes, start with half a cup a day, then go to 1 cup a day. So progress is the goal, not perfection. And as you start eating 70-80% of your foods coming from whole plant foods, you start seeing benefits in your diabetes, and you start seeing improvements in your insulin resistance, which can then help, create a path for lowering your medication requirements. But you want to make sure you work with your physician to do that in a safe manner. The third common myth that I encounter is fruit is bad. I cannot eat fruit, and people wanting to stay away from fruit. And on top of that, when they do eat fruit, they are told that they should eat fruit with something that is high in protein and fat. So they're typically told eat a piece of fruit with cheese or eat a piece of fruit with peanut butter. Well, the issue is when you eat foods which are high in fat and protein, especially animal protein, you will find that you create more insulin resistance. Meaning, first scenario where you just eat a whole apple, cut it up in pieces and eat that without adding anything to it, maybe a sprinkle of cinnamon or black pepper is great, but no other foods. And that absorption in glucose and fructose absorption is very steady. Versus if you add cheese or peanut butter with that, now that fat in those foods will 100% be absorbed, and it will actually interfere with the uptake of glucose and fructose by your body. And so you see a bigger spike of those sugar numbers right after you do that combination. So if the idea again is to eat enough. If you just eat half an apple, you're not going to be full. But if you eat a whole apple, if you're really hungry, you can eat 2 apples. But as long as you eat enough of fresh fruits without any extra added fats or protein sources on top. And keep in mind, fruits also have protein. You may feel surprised, but yes, fruits also have a little bit of protein. There is lots of carbohydrates, there's lots of fiber, vitamins and minerals, but there's also a little bit of fat and a little bit of protein. So you don't have to eat protein or fat extra on top of the fruit. You just want to make sure you eat enough fruit at a time that you can get the benefit and be full from eating it. So making sure that you're eating the fruit by itself and not mixing it up. And what I do personally and also advise my patients is usually we tend to overeat in the evening, maybe from the stress, or we didn't eat enough in the morning, which, as I said, ideally we want to eat more in the daytime. But one of the quick hacks to make sure you don't overeat at dinner time is to make sure you have at least 2 to 3, maybe 4 servings of fruit. One serving is half a cup of fresh cut fruit, about 30 minutes to an hour before dinner time. What it does is, one, the fruit is absorbed and processed quickly without getting any interference from other foods. And second, your hunger and cravings go down. So when you eat your dinner, you're not going to overeat and end up going for more high fat and high sugar type of foods, because your body is not in that craving mode anymore. It is more steady, and the fruit has nicely processed and all done with. And the last, the myths that I also encounter quite a few times is, oh, diabetics cannot do intermittent fasting or cannot fast. Well, doing water fasting that is more than 72 hours has to be medically supervised for anybody. And especially if you have diabetes, you should talk with your physician, make sure they can make appropriate changes in your medications for you to, do the fasting. But again, the key is not perfection. The key is to start. If you're not fasting at all, if you're eating something before going to bed, you are clogging up your liver for a night shift, which it needs really to focus on detoxification and cleaning of the body. So trying to make sure that you eat in the middle of the day majority of your calories. One good timeline that I usually try to follow and tell my patients as well is eat between either 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. depending on your schedule, up till 6 to 7 p.m. So if you do 10 to 6, you get an 8-hour feeding window with 3 meals and a fruit snack, and you can easily have 16 hours of no food overnight. And again, if you're on insulin, if you're on any medications for diabetes, you do want to talk with your physician, make sure that you have a plan to reduce them the days that you do that, so that you don't end up with low blood sugars overnight, because we don't want that. But it is very much possible for diabetics to do intermittent fasting, and it is actually beneficial for diabetics to do the fasting and for anybody else as well, because we really need a daily routine where our liver and the body can focus on cleansing itself. We have that mechanism by nature, we're just not letting it do its job. If we eat late in the night, if we stay up late at night, we interfere with that detox schedule. So trying to make sure that you do not eat after 7 p.m., not even a piece of fruit. Once you finish your dinner, you should stop eating and at least have 3 hours of no food overnight. That will, 3 hours of no food before bedtime, so that when you go to sleep, your stomach should be all empty. It should have processed the food you ate, and it should already be into the intestine and doing, what it needs to do further. So if you allow the liver to do its job, the liver will start healing, the insulin resistance will go down, your sugars will start improving, you'll start losing weight, you will feel better, you will need less and less medications. And in many cases, you can completely reverse your type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes. So fasting is a very essential part of the healing routine, but you have to make sure that your medications are appropriately adjusted so that you don't end up with low blood sugars. So with that, I'm going to end with my last slide, two quotes. As Ayurveda always says, if the diet is wrong, medication is of no use. And if the diet is correct, then medication of no use is of no need. And Hippocrates has always, mentioned that we have the strongest and the greatest healing power and force in the world. Our body has that capability. All we need is to give it the right environment with the right food, the right mindset, the right sleep routine, the right activity, and avoiding toxins as much as possible. So over to Dr. Bindra again, and thank you everyone again for your attention, and thank you.
Thank you, Soham Patel, for this lovely talk this evening. It was had a lot of information, which I think was very important to most individuals, as people do have these myths and they come very often with them. I've heard actually most of them all the time, alluding to the different factors. What I really liked about it was that it's a progress and it's not perfection. And that's very, very important to understand, that when you do develop diabetes, it's a marathon, it's not a sprint relay. So it's something that happens very slowly over time when you make your changes. And if it doesn't change immediately, it's not to be disheartened, but it will happen over time. As the body starts changing with your, increased efforts. So a whole food plant-based diet, eating 3 meals a day, enjoying the fruits that you eat and enjoying the food that you eat, cooking it with healthy ingredients is very important to achieve this success. So with that, I would like to share with you a few slides that I think are important to understand diabetes. So for most Asian Indian Americans, as we can see, that diabetes is the highest amongst any other ethnic race that you can actually see. And there are several reasons behind that, which I will come to. But Filipinos also follow somewhat right behind us as well. And this is actually in the Bay Area. It's from Palo Alto Medical Foundation. And it talks about people in California, where we notice that Indians are fairly high in women as well as in men, and just after Filipinos. So the rest are all then lagging way behind. But it is very important to note that our ethnicity has a great propensity to develop diabetes. Now, we know about the myths of diabetes, but what we want to understand is, how do we know that we're going to get it, and what makes us prevent it from getting it? After all, you can only prevent something if you know what it is and what you need to do about it. So the pancreas is an organ that's in your tummy, and it's quite right in the center. And what it does is it produces insulin. And it also produces another hormone called glucagon, which is the opposite of the work of insulin. But essentially, insulin is what brings glucose levels down. And it's very, very important. So if you don't have a pancreas, essentially you behave like what we call a type 1 diabetic, who essentially needs insulin to survive. But a type 2 diabetic has their pancreas, which may not be working to the extent that we want it to work. So this is what Dr. Patel talked about. He talked about insulin resistance. And what is insulin resistance? Is the insulin is required for glucose to enter into the cell. It is essentially your key that needs to fit into the keyhole. Now, if you have a diet that is so full of triglycerides and full of fat food, it generally clogs up this area and doesn't allow that key to enter, which leaves all this glucose floating around in the bloodstream, causing all its damage. And the more and more insulin is required to overcome that glucose to enter into this cell. And that's what we call insulin resistance. You need glucose to go inside so that it can be going to the liver, to the muscle, to the organs, in order so that it can be used properly in order to make energy. Now, you can have insulin resistance if you're fat. You can also have insulin resistance if you're thin. And the way we look at it is, where does that fat go? So if you're the shape of a pear, or if you're shape of an apple, we're not going to be derogatory to anybody or make anybody feel bad. But essentially all that we're trying to say is that the abdominal fat that collects, or the central obesity that collects right in the center, collects what we call visceral fat. And that fat goes around all your organs and causes damage and leads to diabetes, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, etc. Whereas if you're more of a pear structure, which most South Asians are pears and most women are pear structures, they do not have as great a propensity to develop diabetes. That doesn't mean that they don't get it at all, but the risks are lesser. So when we talk about people who walk into a clinic, especially people who come in to see me, the first thing they say is that I was diagnosed with diabetes today. Well, I don't think you're not diagnosed with diabetes today. You were diagnosed with diabetes many years ago. The time of diagnosis is here when you walk in, but actually you were diagnosed maybe 5 or 10 years ago when your glucose levels had already started to rise. And so the first rise that you see is actually after meals, and that's all coming from insulin resistance, as you can see in the lower chart. And all this depends on what we call the beta cells. So the beta cells come from that pancreas that I showed you earlier to release insulin. And the beta cells, they fall as you start developing diabetes. And by the time you're diagnosed with diabetes, you've lost 50% of them already. So if you don't take care of them further by losing the weight, taking care of oneself, one will develop more and more insulin resistance, higher glucose levels, and all the damage that occurs from it. So there are 8 risk factors of diabetes. Some of them were talked about prior. As we get older, maybe above 40, you could be even younger, more the inactive lifestyle, your high cholesterol, high blood pressure, a BMI above 23. And I'm saying this 23 is because Asian Indians are obese, are considered obese at a lower BMI as compared to Caucasians. So even if you were to be 25 or 26, you would be considered obese. And so you want to have a very low BMI. Your family history, of course, is something that you really can't change, but you can change all of the other factors that are right here, by which Dr. Patel talked about. We talked about the intermittent fasting. We talk about a whole food plant-based diet, talk about eating 3 healthy meals, exercising. Exercise is a big component that will help you to bring down diabetes and pre-diabetes. There is one topic here which we haven't alluded to, and that's gestational diabetes. That is diabetes in pregnancy. If a woman had gestational diabetes, her chance of developing diabetes later on is about 50%. So it's very important that to lose the weight that one gains during pregnancy, to try and come down to that maternal weight. And especially if there's a family history, to keep a watch on your sugars, check your blood sugars, monitor them, and look for levels of glucose that might be elevated in order to prevent what's coming your way. Prevention is a lot easier than when you actually get it and treating it, because then you're already causing so much amount of damage. So with that, I would like to introduce 2 remarkable individuals who I feel have put all their heart and soul and efforts into improving themselves. They were both diagnosed with diabetes, and they have both shown remarkable outcomes. The first one is Dr. Amit Gupta. And Mr. Gupta is a serial entrepreneur, and he's a health hero. He was diagnosed with diabetes with an A1C, I think, of 10.8, if I'm not wrong, and worked really hard at it, has lost most of the weight. I'm sure most of you can see him in the picture right now on the screen, as well as I can see him right now as well. And he has a remarkable story to tell about his success. The second individual is actually a patient of mine that saw me last year in July. He came in looking pretty much like what he looks on the left side. And so Mr. Enciso came in fairly obese. He was fatigued. He said his sugars were high. His A1C was in the 10s. And he has lost a remarkable amount of weight. By the time I saw him in November, he was a different person altogether. And both of them have very exciting stories to share with you, which I will first have Dr. Gupta come on and speak to us for a few minutes.
Thank you so much, Dr. Bindra. So a little bit about myself and my own background and personal history. So I was an engineer by training, and then in the Valley, I became an entrepreneur. And I've been an entrepreneur for the last 20 odd years. And as it goes on with the entrepreneurship journey and the career in the Valley, you work really, really hard, and you kind of do it at the expense of everything else, including your health. And that was also part of what I did for many, many years. And then I got the shock of my life about 7 years ago. This was back in 2014, when during a routine checkup, the doctors informed me that my A1C had shot to the roof. It was over 10, and I had a full-blown case of diabetes. And I think, as you heard from Dr. Soham and Dr. Archana, basically diabetes is a progressive disease. And so the fact that it was diagnosed in 2014, it just means that's when it was officially diagnosed. In practice, the process started several decades before. In fact, there was some signs that I should have paid more attention to. Regardless, so this was a place where I got shocked and said to take some actions. And I kind of got it a little bit under control, but I was starting to drift again. And then in 2019, my doctor told me that I would need to start insulin. And that was a point where I said, no, I don't want to do that. And so that was a point where I basically decided to make lifestyle changes to correct this issue. And also talked with a number of doctors, including doctors from El Camino, from Palo Alto Medical Foundation, and from Stanford, a bunch of stuff, but working in collaboration with my doctors, made a set of changes that led me to get my A1C down to well below 6. And that's considered to be below the diabetic threshold.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. I'd like to bring Mr. Enciso on. You'd like to come and speak a few words?
Yes, hi, my name is Alfredo Enciso. A little bit about myself. I was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes last July. For me, it was a shocker. I kind of like, for me, it was a shocker. I went for routine checkup as well. I wasn't feeling well. I felt weak, fatigued. I had no energy. So I thought something was wrong with me. And for me, I really wouldn't hardly ever go to the doctor unless I was really sick. So for me, that moment when I went, it was a moment for me that I was really sick. I had blood work done. Found out that I was diabetic. That's not something that runs in my family. So for me, it was a shocker. And I saw my primary doctor, which referred me to Dr. Bindra, who guided me and helped me to combat the diabetes. I work a busy lifestyle, so taking care of myself wasn't a priority until I was sick. Then when I found out that I was really sick with diabetes, I decided to turn that around. And reason for that was I wanted to live longer for my family, live longer for myself. So making lifestyle changes has helped a lot. Seeing the right doctors and following their guidance is what has helped me quite a bit. And sharing my story for me is not easy because I'm more of a private, kind of quiet person to myself. But I'm glad that I'm given the opportunity to be able to share what happened to me as a positive, and hopefully everyone else can take that positive as well.
Thank you so much for sharing those words with us. We're all very happy that you've been very successful in getting better. We have a few question and answers here that we'd like to go over. Most of them are for Dr. Patel. So there are a couple of them about eating other foods in moderation. So somebody who likes to eat meat and eggs, what's a good animal protein for such a person? What is its reasonable frequency per week, 1 to 2 times? Dr. Patel?
Not think of food as fat, protein, carbohydrate. So thinking of meat as the only source of protein, we are starting off with the wrong planum there, right? But again, everybody has a different background, different cultural conditioning. So making drastic changes don't work. So what I tell my patients is, let's say you're having meat 2 or 3 times a day, going down to once a day is a start. And then working your way down to having it maybe 2 or 3 times a week is even a further step. And then maybe going to having once a week, 4 or 6 ounces of some form of meat, is even further. I don't think there is one meat better than others. Yes, obviously anything that is fried or battered up, with flour is going to make it even more worse. So something that is baked or broiled, not broiled, but baked or poached. Because again, when you use cooking techniques which are very high temperature, it does tend to cause more issues in the food. So baking can also involve high temperatures. So actually the best would be steamed or poached, small portions of meat, as less number of times a week that you can. But again, not focusing on just how much you're cutting back on the meat, but focusing on how much more you can add into your daily routine. So how much more vegetables and fruits and beans can you eat? That really makes the difference, because that's the fiber rich foods, and that makes the biggest difference. So don't think of the changes as, okay, I need to cut this out, cut this out, cut this out, because that creates a negative mindset. Think of, I'm going to be adding a lot of these things more, and I'll cut back on the meat step by step. That will actually be more sustainable.
Couple of other questions. One is on drink milk and eat cheese. What's a reasonable amount per week for that?
Again, if the goal is to help reverse insulin resistance, then and if you give me the option of dairy, which includes milk and cheese, versus meat, I would actually suggest to stop the dairy first and then slowly work on your way down with the meat. The reason being, dairy is loaded with lots of hormones, pesticides. You also find a lot of IGF-1, which is insulin growth factor 1, which is also a very growth promoting molecule. And when you have cheese, you have even more concentration of all those foods, because it takes a whole lot of milk to be turned into a small block of cheese. And so you're also getting more concentration of casein and IGF-1 and hormones and pesticides. And that really does a toll on your gut. And again, leaky gut, I'm just mentioning that word, but that's a whole different topic by itself. So
There's another
if
one here.
possible, I would suggest to stop the dairy completely. Again, if it's not practically possible, I would suggest cutting it down step by step, as you would do with the meat.
There's another one here on coffee. It is pure black coffee and or mixed with low fat or non-fat milk only, no sugar added. What are your thoughts?
So I think there is a lot of data coming out regarding the benefits of coffee for cognition, for overall health, brain health. And so I don't drink tea or coffee, but because I don't have that routine. But if you like to have a nice cup of coffee or tea in the morning, or maybe one more cup in later in the day, it is a good habit. The studies actually show you should be having 4 to 5 cups of coffee a day, which I'm still trying to understand more about. But I would say this: you have to make sure that it's organic coffee, so you're not getting the pesticides. And second, it is a shade grown coffee, meaning coffee that's conventionally grown in a lot of sunlight is going to have more tannic acids and less antioxidants, versus coffee that's grown under a canopy of big trees or on the side of a hill, under the shade of the hill in the mountain, is going to have more antioxidants and less tannic acid. So you do want to, and it's easily available now. All you need to do is Google 2 words, organic and shade grown coffee, and you will find lots of options. So having 1 or 2 cups of that, maybe more based on the data that's coming out, is great. Black is best. If you need to add something, I would suggest use unsweetened plant milk, like organic almond milk, or organic non-GMO soy milk, or rice milk, because you don't want to add the casein or heavy cream and make undo the benefits of the coffee. So if you can drink it black, that's great. If you need to add something, then try to use a plant-based milk. If you need a sweetener, rather than adding sugar, I would suggest make some date paste. So you basically soak some dates in water and then blend it into a paste and keep it in a mason jar in your refrigerator, so you can use that as your liquid sweetener. Or the second option, if you don't want to do that extra step, is to keep some pure maple syrup, and you can use a little bit of that. Again, not overdoing it. The maple syrup does have a little lower glycemic index compared to honey and agave, but the best is black. If you can add some plant milk if you need to, and if you need to add some sweetener, then date paste is better, but if you need to, then you can use maple syrup.
I think thank you, Dr. Patel. I think we're going to take a short break here and have Som come in and speak for a little bit.
Yeah, thanks, Archana. And we'll continue with the questions. We just have 2 minutes by the schedule, but we'll certainly extend this session. Two things very quickly. We are definitely going to start a support group, and I would invite Raj Shah, who's just going to show you 2 slides about his data, what he has accomplished. And we are very excited to tell you that we want to invite all of you for this support group that he's going to talk about. And in the meantime, after he finishes, we'll do a very quick poll on our artificial intelligence course that will take about a minute, and then we are back to question and answer. So over to you, Raj Shah.
All right, thank you. So although this is about what I have done as reverse, actually more than diabetes, many chronic diseases. So very quickly about me, I'm 65 years old. My wife is a teacher turned therapist, a techie son, and a doctor daughter. I've been in and out of startups and large companies. My most fun project in a large company was at Google, where my team built all the data on maps worldwide, every street, every stop sign, every speed limit, every turn signal, every business name. Right now, I'm Chief Product Officer as a AI CV company I founded. I hike daily, bike weekly, and go on big hikes annually. In fact, if you are able to see my background, it's Mount Everest taken by my camera from a place called Kalapathar near Everest Base Camp. Love music and I play harmonica. All right, my crisis. My diabetes was gradually getting worse. It was 7.3 in early 2020, then down to 6.4 using 59 milligrams of metformin per day. But the real crisis happened when my grandnephew over Thanksgiving last year asked me, "Kaka, are you pregnant?" And I kind of came home and said, "I'm not fitting into my regular pants. Because of COVID, working from home, I'm only using, wasn't using my regular pants, so I didn't realize I'd put on so much weight." Then I started looking at other things. My blood pressure was increasing quite a bit. I went to my primary care, and I was already on 3 meds, 2 meds, and 3 meds, and she added 2 more. And this is I can't do anything more. I went to cardiologist, and now he added 2 more. Now I have on 7 meds, and I still saw spikes going up to 195 or 110. He then sent me a nephrologist, and he did ultrasound on kidney, thinking that might be a problem. And then he said, "We'll have to do trial and error. I have 3 more drugs to try." That really spooked me. My sodium was also becoming very low. In fact, it was scary because my daughter told me, "Dad, don't be alone. And tell mom, if you look foggy, go to ER." That was very scary. So I felt like I was heading into a major event, either a stroke or a heart attack. And my cardiologist told me that these days, believe that if you're a diabetic, your risk of a heart attack is as high as risk of a heart attack if you already had one heart attack. So I was very scared. With God's grace, I actually found out about a friend, Lalit, who runs his program called Make My Health program. It's actually very consistent with everything I've heard from both of you. And with that, my results were fantastic. So here is where I was on January 22nd. Blood pressure, 7 meds, diabetes, A1C 6.4 with 1500 milligram of metformin. I started taking statin. I had trigeminal neuralgia. I was taking Levitra for sexual dysfunction, Zyrtec frequently, Pepcid frequently, had sleep apnea, and BMI 26.7. And once I got on this program, just in 6 weeks, my blood pressure was under control with 2 meds. And I stopped metformin because my numbers were looking very good. I was wearing a continuous glucose monitor, and based on that, I estimated the A1C was down to 5.7. And then when I took a real blood test in April, and it was actually down to 5.5. Didn't have a stop taking statin. My cholesterol numbers are back in range. My trigeminal neuralgia pain is also gone. I'm not taking any medication. I don't need as much of Levitra anymore. I haven't taken Zyrtec. I haven't taken Pepcid. Sleep apnea, I haven't actually tested myself, but I've lost about 26 pounds, and BMI is in range, less than 23 as Dr. Bindra suggested. Okay, so that's it. And I said you can take charge of your own health at any age. And a call to action is I'm starting a support group. Please join that. And the purpose of this group is to maintain, improve motivation for the program you're on. and remember to interact, share, and learn from each other. Also, this session is focused on diabetes. I think this program, I believe, will help with other chronic diseases as well. We'll meet every 2 weeks, Wednesdays at 6 p.m. That's the tentative time. Starting, I believe, June, not next week, but the week after. We'll limit to 25 people because more than that, you really can't have an interesting discussion. Even with 25, not everyone's going to show up every week. Okay. So that's it. I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Raj. Thank you. Wonderful.
Thank you. So back to our questions. So the next question is, does lifting weights help diabetes at all? It seems like it might because skeletal muscle is a major consumer of glucose, or does it not give you any more than other kinds of exercise?
Yes, obviously resistance training will help build your muscle mass, which is also one of the main consumers of glucose in the body. And when you exercise, your insulin resistance will improve. But I do want to spend 30 seconds and try to explain the difference between aerobic exercise and anaerobic or resistance exercise. So when you are doing jogging for maybe a mile or 2 miles, or going for a bike ride, or just a brisk walk, you're mostly in an aerobic environment in terms of the oxidation of your glucose. And in that situation, you'll find the glucose tends to go down faster, especially if you're on medications. You may feel hypoglycemic if you did not change your medications. But with resistance training, when you push weights, initially in the first 30 minutes, maybe 2-4 hours, you will see sugars running higher because your body is in a sympathetic mode, overdrive, because of the exercise, and that causes the sugars to actually go up. Now, eventually, later in the day and next day, your sugars will still improve. And over time, as you build more muscle mass, you will also have better insulin functioning. But if you're tracking your sugars through a continuous glucose monitor, you may see a spike in your sugars if you are doing weights. So I typically tell my patients to do a sandwich model where they do 5-10 minutes of aerobic, and then they do 20-30 minutes of weights, and then they again end it with 5-10 minutes of aerobic, like just walking or biking. That allows them to kind of lower off that sugar spike that could happen from the weight. But over time, and it definitely helps with insulin resistance.
How does yoga fit into that equation?
Yoga, I think, is a more holistic. We narrow down yoga to a very simple word, but it's actually whole system in its being. And the whole Patanjali Yoga Sutras, if you understand, only 10 or 12 of those talk about food, or not food. Only 10 of 12 talk about the different asanas, but majority of the sutras actually focus on the whole lifestyle. So your sleep, your mindset, your breathing, all those things. So yes, yoga is a complete system. If you are following that level of breathing and that degree of flexibility of your body, and also working on the right food and the mindset, it works. So there are a few yogasanas which are beneficial. There is one called Ardha Matsyendrasana, which is considered beneficial for the pancreas and the abdominal organs in general. And then a pranayam called Kapalbhati pranayam, which is going to involve your stomach movements quite a bit, abdominal movements. That is also very effective in helping with reducing visceral fat. But again, yoga is not just a word or one posture, it's a whole system.
What are your thoughts on boiling vegetables versus stir frying with olive oil?
Like I said before, when you use moisture-based cooking methods, you preserve more nutrients and you get to cook them at a lower temperature, versus if you use high temperature cooking, you do tend to reduce nutrients. And secondly, if you're adding olive oil itself has a low smoking point. So when you heat it up, it actually turns more rancid. and creates more free radicals, which we don't want. It creates inflammation in the body. So yes, if you want to have flavor of the olive oil, it may be better to steam your vegetables and then maybe drizzle a little bit on top rather than heating it up in the olive oil. If you want to have the olive oil, I would rather prefer eating the olives because you get the fiber and the fats and the antioxidants and not just pure liquid fat in terms of the olive oil. But as I said, if you want to use olive oil, you would rather be better off steaming the vegetables or boiling them and then drizzling it as a flavor. But if you heat it up, it actually creates more free radicals.
So there's another question. For someone with diabetes for nearly 30 years with oral medicines such as metformin and Prandin and A1C around 6.7, what can be done to bring the A1C further down and prevent complications?
Again, this is a specific question. I'm going to
Yes.
give a generalized answer. Like I said before, that as you work on improving your nutrition, you work on improving your sleep routine, your activity, your sugars will start improving. You have to work with your physician to make sure that the medications are appropriately tapered down as you do that. And, also you want to check a lab called C-peptide to see where your insulin production stands, how much insulin your body is still making. So if you have a C-peptide above 1, it gives you a fair chance that you can potentially, come off the medications with the right lifestyle. But again, as I said, it's a specific question. I'm going to give a generalized, impression of what can be done.
Thanks to Dr. Archana Bindra for moderating, and thanks to Dr. Soham Patel. I know it's very late for you. It's 10:14 for you in the night. So
yes,
thanks
it
for
is.
staying back and telling us all the good stuff. Any last word, Dr. Patel and Dr. Archana? Any last word from you all?
Yes, diabetes is a progress. I like that, not a perfection. I'm going to start using that in my practice.
I was going to
It's a
say
marathon,
progress,
not a sprint
perfection.
relay. So, just make it work at it slowly. All your perseverance in the end will ultimately give you a good outcome.
I want to thank Soumya Elora, who have been doing a lot of work. You must be seeing our posts, so making this event a success and whatever we have been able to accomplish today. Naren Bakshi, our co-founder and chief mentor, is also with us. So Naren, thank you. All the support and all the kind of persistent, promotion to crack the wellness code. And of course, Raj Shah and our health heroes and everybody today, including Dr. Sachin Deshmukh, who has been assiduously supporting this wellness movement. And finally, to all the participants staying back and being with us. So let's hope that we can all work together on this diabetes forum, and see you next time.